I stared at the credit card statement in my hand, my fingers trembling. $28,456. The number screamed at me, bold and unrelenting, as if it were mocking me. My vision blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. How did I let it get this bad? I dropped the paper onto the table and buried my face in my hands. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. What am I going to do? I whispered to no one in particular. The silence of my apartment was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It started so innocently. Groceries here, a bill there, a vacation I thought I deserved after working so hard last year. But now it was a mountain I couldn't climb. At work that afternoon, I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen. My boss, Mr. Reynolds, walked past and paused by my cubicle. "Rachel," he said casually, his tone too light for what came next. "Just a heads up, we're reviewing budgets next week. There might be some adjustments." My stomach dropped. "Adjustments?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. He gave me a tight smile and shrugged. "You know how it is." And then he walked away, leaving me frozen in place. I clenched my fists under the desk, my nails digging into my palms. Adjustments. That was corporate speak for layoffs, and we both knew it. That evening, I stood in line at the grocery store with a basket of essentials, milk, bread, eggs, and tried not to think about the statement still sitting on my kitchen table. $23.47, the cashier said with a polite smile as she scanned the last item. I swiped my card and held my breath. Declined. "Let me try again," I said quickly, my voice cracking slightly as heat crept up my neck. She nodded sympathetically as I swiped again. Declined. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her tone laced with pity. My cheeks burned as I fumbled to put items back, first the eggs, then the milk, until only a loaf of bread remained. "Have a good night," she said gently, as she handed me the receipt for $2.49. I nodded stiffly and walked out of the store, with tears stinging my eyes. I sat in my car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The bread sat on the passenger seat, like a cruel reminder of how far I'd fallen. "What's wrong with me?" I shouted at no one, slamming my palm against the dashboard. My voice cracked as sobs racked through me, raw and uncontrollable. I wiped at my face with shaking hands but couldn't stop crying. The weight of it all, the debt, the job uncertainty, the humiliation, pressed down on me until I felt like I couldn't breathe. If I don't fix this soon... The thought trailed off, as a fresh wave of panic hit me like a tidal wave. For the first time in years, I felt truly helpless. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone like it was a ticking bomb. The credit card statement was still on the table, glaring at me like an accusation. I can't do this alone. My hands shook as I scrolled to Megan's name and hit call. "Rachel!" Megan's voice was warm, familiar, and steady. Everything I wasn't. "I'm in trouble," I blurted out, my voice cracking. "I don't know what to do." "Okay, slow down," she said gently. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, but the words spilled out in a rush anyway. "The debt. It's out of control. $28,000, Megan. I can't make the payments anymore. The interest keeps piling up, and now my boss is hinting at layoffs." "Rachel," she interrupted, her tone firmer now. "You need to face this head on." "How?" I snapped, frustration bubbling over. "I don't even know where to start." "First," she said calmly, "you make a budget. Write down every single expense, everything, and figure out what you can cut." I let out a bitter laugh. "Cut what? There's nothing left to cut." "There's always something," she said firmly. "Subscriptions, eating out, anything that isn't essential." Her words stung, but I knew she was right. Rachel, she added softly, you can fix this. But you have to start now. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen in front of me. The room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I stared at the blank page for what felt like hours before finally writing. Rent, $1,200. The numbers came slowly at first. Utilities, groceries. But soon they filled the page like a flood I couldn't stop. By the time I reached the bottom, my stomach churned as realization hit me. I'm spending more than I earn. My hands trembled as I flipped back through the pages, hoping for some mistake, some magic solution. But there wasn't one. The math didn't lie. The next morning at work, Mr. Reynolds called me into his office. My heart pounded as I sat across from him, clutching my notebook like it could somehow protect me. We're finalizing the layoffs this week, he said bluntly, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to give you a heads up. My chest tightened as panic surged through me like wildfire. Am I on the list? He hesitated, a split second that felt like an eternity, before answering, I don't know yet. I nodded stiffly and left his office without another word. By lunchtime, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, with tears streaming down my face. If I lose this job... The thought trailed off, as dread swallowed me whole. Megan's words echoed in my mind. You have to start now. But how do you start when everything feels like it's already ending? The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m., but sleep felt like a distant memory. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by a sea of old bills and receipts. The dim light from the lamp cast long shadows across the papers, each one a reminder of how far I'd fallen. I picked up a credit card statement from 3 years ago, the date printed neatly at the top. My balance back then was only $2,000. My chest tightened as I stared at the number, my mind racing. How did it get so bad? I whispered into the silence. Memories hit me like a tidal wave. Impulsive shopping sprees where I convinced myself I needed that designer handbag. Expensive dinners out with friends where I ordered the most extravagant dishes. Vacations I couldn't afford, but justified with the words, I deserve this. I closed my eyes, but the guilt was relentless. It clawed at me, whispering accusations in my ear. You did this to yourself. The next morning, Megan called as I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cold cup of coffee. Rachel, she said gently, how are you holding up? I let out a bitter laugh. I'm not. She paused for a moment before continuing. Listen, I know someone who can help, a financial counselor. Her name's Linda Cooper. She's amazing. A counselor? I repeated, my voice laced with skepticism. Megan, I don't need someone to tell me how bad things are. I already know. She won't just tell you what's wrong, Megan said firmly. She'll help you fix it. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. I don't know. It feels like admitting defeat. It's not defeat, she countered. It's taking control. Her words hung in the air long after we ended the call. That evening, I sat alone on the couch, staring at Linda's contact information Megan had texted me earlier. My stomach churned as doubt crept in again. What if she judges me? What if she thinks I'm hopeless? But then I thought about Emily. Her innocent smile when she asked for cereal we couldn't afford. And something inside me shifted. I picked up my phone and dialed the number with trembling fingers. Linda Cooper speaking. Came a calm voice on the other end. Hi, I said hesitantly, my voice barely above a whisper. My name is Rachel Carter, and I think I need your help. I sat in Linda Cooper's office, my hands gripping the edges of the chair like it might keep me from falling apart. The room was small but tidy, with stacks of files neatly arranged on her desk. Linda, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward and folded her hands. Rachel, she began, her tone firm but not unkind. "I'm going to be honest with you. If you keep going like this, bankruptcy isn't just a possibility. It's inevitable." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. She handed me a tissue as tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. "I'm not saying this to scare you," she continued. "I'm saying it because you need to understand how serious this is." I nodded weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how I let it get this bad." Linda leaned back slightly, her expression softening. "It happens to more people than you think. But the good news is, you can fix it." She pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began sketching out a plan. "First," she said, pointing at the top of the page, "we're cutting up all but one credit card. You'll keep one for emergencies only. No more swiping for everyday expenses." My stomach churned as I imagined slicing through the cards that had been my safety net for so long. Or was it just an illusion? "Second," she continued, "we'll negotiate lower interest rates with your creditors. It won't be easy, but I've done it before, and I'll help you every step of the way." I nodded hesitantly, still unsure if I could pull this off. "Third," she said firmly, "you need to increase your income. A side hustle, babysitting, freelancing, anything that brings in extra cash." I let out a shaky laugh. "I don't even know where to start." Linda smiled for the first time since we'd met. "That's why I'm here." By the end of our session, my head was spinning with numbers and strategies. The plan felt overwhelming, like climbing Mount Everest without training. But Linda's confidence in me sparked something small and fragile inside. Hope. "You can do this," she said as we stood to shake hands. Her grip was strong and steady, grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in months. "Thank you," I said softly, blinking back tears. As I left her office with the plan clutched tightly in my hands, I realized something. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was starting to fight back. The first thing I did was pull out my designer handbags, every single one. The ones I'd splurged on during those treat-yourself moments. The ones I'd convinced myself I needed. They sat in a neat row on my bed, their glossy leather mocking me. I picked up the black one with gold accents, the one I bought after a promotion at work. My fingers traced the stitching as guilt twisted in my stomach. How much had this cost me? $400? $500? I grabbed my phone and snapped pictures of each bag, uploading them to an online resale site with shaky hands. Within hours, offers started coming in. By the next day, they were gone. Canceling my subscriptions was next. "No more Netflix?" Emily asked, her face falling as I explained that we couldn't afford it anymore. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing her hair back. "We'll find other ways to have fun." She nodded reluctantly, but the disappointment in her eyes nearly broke me. Spotify went next. Then, the meal delivery service. By the time I was done, the only thing left was the internet, because without it, I couldn't work or manage my plan. Meal prepping became my new routine. Every Sunday, I stood in the kitchen chopping vegetables and portioning out meals for the week. No more takeout. No more fancy lattes on the way to work. Every penny went toward paying off debt. One night, Megan called while I was scrubbing out a Tupperware container. "Hey," she said cheerfully, "we're all going out for drinks tonight. You should come." I froze, gripping the sponge tightly. I can't," I said finally. "Why not?" she asked, her tone confused. "It's not in the budget," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause before she replied gently. "Rachel, this is temporary. Short-term pain for long-term gain." Her words stuck with me long after we hung up. The sacrifices piled up quickly. My social life disappeared almost overnight as I turned down invitations and avoided shopping trips with friends. They didn't understand why I'd suddenly become so frugal, why I wasn't fun anymore. But slowly, so slowly, the balances started to shrink. I logged into my credit card account one evening and stared at the number. $26,800. It wasn't much of a dent, but it was something. For the first time in years, the number was going down instead of up. I leaned back in my chair and let out a shaky breath. The sacrifices hurt, more than I wanted to admit, but they were working. As Megan had said, short-term pain for long-term gain. The engine sputtered violently, and then silence. My car rolled to a stop on the side of the road, the dashboard lights flashing like a cruel joke. "No! No! No!" I shouted, slamming my palms against the steering wheel. "Not now!" I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The clock on the dashboard read 7:42 a.m. I was already late for work. I tried turning the key again, but the car refused to start. The sound of passing cars whizzing by only made me feel more stranded. "Why is this happening now?" The mechanic's voice was calm, but firm as he handed me the estimate later that afternoon. "It's going to be $1,200, he said, tapping the paper with his pen. "The alternator is shot, and you'll need a new battery too." I stared at the number like it was written in another language. $1,200. My stomach churned as I thought about my dwindling savings and the credit cards I'd sworn not to use anymore. "I can't afford this," I whispered, my voice cracking. He shrugged sympathetically, but said nothing. By the time I got home, I felt completely defeated. I dropped my bag on the floor and sank into the couch, tears spilling over before I could stop them. "This is it," I said aloud to myself. "I can't do this anymore." My phone buzzed beside me, and I picked it up without thinking. Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Rachel," she said as soon as I answered, her voice steady but concerned. "My car broke down," I choked out between sobs. "The repair bill is $1,200. I don't have it." Linda paused for a moment before replying calmly. "Setbacks are part of the journey, Rachel. This doesn't mean you've failed." "But it feels like failure," I snapped, wiping at my face angrily. I was finally making progress, and now this. "I know it feels that way," she said gently. "But you can adjust your plan without derailing everything completely." Her words were like a lifeline in the storm. She walked me through possible solutions, using part of my emergency fund, negotiating with the mechanic for a payment plan, and reminded me that setbacks didn't erase progress. Later that evening, Megan came over with her checkbook in hand. "Here," she said simply, handing me a loan for half the repair costs. "Pay me back when you can." Tears filled my eyes again, this time from gratitude instead of despair. "Megan, thank you." She smiled and hugged me tightly. "You're going to get through this." The next morning, as I drove my newly repaired car to work, I felt something unfamiliar stirring inside me. Resilience. Setbacks weren't failures. They were just another part of the climb. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. The balance was there, clear as day. $0. Zero. For the first time in years, one of my credit cards was completely paid off. My hands trembled as I refreshed the page, just to make sure it wasn't some kind of mistake. But it wasn't. The number stayed the same. 0. "Oh my God," I whispered, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Relief washed over me like a wave, so overwhelming I could barely breathe. Linda's voice crackled through the speaker during our monthly check-in call later that afternoon. "Rachel," she said warmly, "you're proving that it's possible." I laughed softly, wiping at my cheeks with the sleeve of my sweater. "It doesn't feel real yet." "It's real," she said firmly. "You've worked hard for this, and you're just getting started." Her encouragement was like fuel for my soul. For so long, I'd felt trapped, buried under a mountain of debt with no way out. But now I could see the path forward. Emily ran into the room as I ended the call, her bunny tucked under her arm like always. "Mommy!" she chirped, climbing onto my lap. "Why are you smiling so much?" I hugged her tightly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Because something really good happened today." "What is it?" she asked curiously, her wide eyes sparkling. "It's a grown-up thing," I said with a laugh, brushing her hair back gently. "But it means we're going to be okay." She grinned and hugged me even tighter, her little arms wrapping around my neck. She didn't fully understand what was happening yet, but somehow, she knew it was something good. That evening, as Emily colored at the kitchen table and I cooked dinner, I found myself smiling again, something that had been rare these past few years. The weight on my chest felt lighter now, not gone completely, but manageable. For the first time in years, I felt like there was hope for a brighter future. After Emily went to bed, I sat down with my notebook and flipped to the page where I'd written all my debts months ago, the numbers that had once felt insurmountable. I crossed out the first one with bold strokes. Paid in full. My chest swelled as I stared at the list. There were still balances left to tackle, still work to do, but this victory felt monumental. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, letting the relief wash over me again. For so long, I'd measured wealth in numbers, in bank accounts and paychecks and material things. But now I realized that true wealth wasn't just about money. It was about peace of mind. And for the first time in years, I felt rich.